Hi, I'm Jeff Ray, your host for Economic Outlook. Welcome to our show, where each week we take a deep dive into the regional economy and the people, the companies, and the communities and projects that are helping our region grow. On a typical day, they run 40 trains carrying some 12,000 passengers in and out of Chicago and northern Indiana. They have big plans to improve that service and reduce travel times. We'll take a closer look at the South Shore Railroad and what improvement you can expect in the coming years, coming up on Economic Outlook. For years, the South Shore Railroad has been an important connector for northern Indiana residents into one of the biggest economies in the world, Chicago. Business and leisure travelers have found it a convenient connection, but have at the same time have longed for shorter trips. The Northern Indiana Commuter Transportation District, which operates the South Shore Line, has big plans to do just that. Joining me today for a conversation are Mike Nolan, President and General Manager of the South Shore Line, and Andy Castelny, a St. Joseph County Commissioner and a board member at NICTD. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Great. Just a quick note before we get into our discussion. Here at WNIT, we're respecting social distancing, and as such have both our host and our guests joining us virtually. So guys, I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you. This technology has given us a chance to connect in much different ways, and I'm really grateful for you to be here. So obviously the South Shore has got a lot of attention in recent years with the things that are going on, and so we're going to have that conversation about rail today. Mike, I want to go back to you. So you run the South Shore. You're part of the Northern Indiana Commuter Transportation District and president of the South Shore Line. Tell us a little bit about how you first became involved with the South Shore Railroad.
Well, my first involvement was let's see, I'm going to date myself now. I'm going back to 1978 when I was a freshman at Notre Dame and used to take the old South Shore Line cars back and forth between school and home here in the Chicago suburbs. So I remember the old orange cars, the shake, rattle, and roll that we had prior to the new stainless steel cars that we acquired in 1982. So, my memories of the South Shore go back to the days when you had flag stops out in the middle of a field with a person waving a flashlight. We'd stop at a farm field somewhere east of Michigan City on our way back to campus. Lots changed since then.
Mike, how many years has the South Shore been serving northern Indiana?
We date our birthday to 1908. So we're on our 113th year, 114th year or so right now, and going strong.
Great. Sounds good. And we'll get into talking to us about some of those improvements. Commissioner Castelny, I want to come your way too. And how about you? What's your first memory or experience dealing with the South Shore?
It was a great and a sad, both rolled into one. I was a young man, and we rode into Chicago to go to a Cub game, and unfortunately, the Cubs did what they did back then. They weren't very successfit's I always associated initially the South Shore with the Chicago Cubs because that's how we would go to games.
Well, it's obviously been an important connection for many years, not only from a business traveler standpoint, but a leisure traveler. And I know many, me including Commissioner, have loved that easy access to Chicago and the transportation network that's there. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today. So Mike, I want to go back just a little bit and think about, or maybe just talk passenger rail in general. Sure. I feel like passenger rail is getting a lot of attention around the country. There are communities everywhere that want to have access via passenger rail. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what's happening in the passenger rail space from a popularity standpoint, from an investment standpoint? Just give us a picture of the landscape there.
Sure. I think now I count 30 or so commuter rail agencies around the country. That's grown significantly over the past 20, 25 years. Legacy systems like the system in Chicago or New York or Philadelphia or our system certainly existed, but there's been a big trend to bring commuter rail to agencies or areas around the country that didn't have it. And so that's what really led to the creation of the federal funding program that we have been successful in receiving, called the Capital Investment Grant Program. Back in the late 80s and 90s is where it started. And if you had a big project where you wanted to either start a rail system or you wanted to invest heavily in a rail system, Congress put together a program where you could try to get federal matching funds to allow you to invest in rail. But it continues to be a very popular program around the country. We're very successful. I know we'll talk about that, but it's very competitive to go after those funds because there are many, many areas around the country that want what we already have here today.
Great, Andy, let me come your way because you've been involved for a number of years on the board, involved with other key stakeholders up and down the corridor. Just talk about sort of your experience or even the evolution of what you've seen from your early days of involvement to where you're at today.
I think one of the most crucial things about the NICD board is the political balance. I mean, it is an apolitical organization. So back when it was the old mechanism of a commissioner and a council member from each of the 4 corridor counties, or to its current configuration where the governor appoints one elected official from each of the 4 counties. You know, politics have stayed out of this, but what's best for our communities, both as a region and specifically, have been the most important thing. And I'm glad to see that continue.
Great. So, Mike, when you were brought in to lead the railroad, you had a pretty long list, a to-do list, I guess I would say, a number of capital improvements and things that needed it. And I want to talk about that, but I want to go back first to one other just sort of framing thing. Help remind our, how many trains do you run a day? How many people do you employ? How many passengers, are typically there? And let's talk, maybe sort of pre-pandemic, because I think pandemic, obviously has changed a lot of stuff. And then maybe even a snapshot on how it's going since the pandemic started.
Okay. If I miss any of those questions, Jeff, because I think you just rattled off about 6.
Yeah. Hold off on the capital side and more just remind us real quick of the number of trains, the number of people, that kind of stuff.
We run 39 trains a day in and out of Chicago. Now, some of those trains start in South Bend. We have 5 trains that run directly to Chicago and 5 that come back. We have a number of trains that operate out of Michigan City. It's probably closer to 30, 31 or 32. And then we have some trains that will go to Chicago, and then they'll come back to Gary, and they don't go any farther east, and then they go back to Chicago. So overall, in and out of the city, there's 39 trains a day, and there's just various trains at different stations along the way. Pre-pandemic, we were running between 11,500 and 12,000 trips a day. Revenue was around ridership was around 3.5 million rides a year. $23 or so million in fare revenue on a budget of around 50 million. 350 employees, of which most of those employees are frontline employees, whether they're our conductors or our engineers or maintaining our equipment, carmen, electricians, machinists, line and signal people out on the rail, track laborers, actually doing the physical work to keep the railroad running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry, I apologize, because the more you talk, the more questions pop into my head. And so let me ask one other, because I'm intrigued by the electric, component of that. Is that unique, rare? Are there other ones like this? Help me understand that piece.
Sure. We do run a unique style of electric railroad that really only the South Shore Line and Metra run. It's the power distribution system, 1,500 overhead DC power. There are other systems around the country, though, that are electric. Out in Philadelphia, SEPTA, New York, MTA, the New Jersey Transit, along the Northeast Corridor, along Amtrak, run electric service. California is electrifying a portion of their system now. So there are a number of providers around the country that run on overhead electric wire service, catenary service. Ours is a little unique in the way our power structure works. Great, thanks, Mike. Andy, you want to come back your way for a second? And as I started to tease that,
that when Mike was, came in, there was a pretty long to-do list of capital improvements and such. You mentioned sort of the bipartisan nature, the priorities. Just speak to the thought process behind the board in terms of developing that list, and then I'll go back to Mike for some discussion about some specifics there.
Sure. I mean, we long have seen this as a resource to the northwest corner of the state. So we want to find a way, how do we maximize this investment? How do we maximize this resource? So one of the things that was limiting, at least from a South Bend, from a St. Joe County standpoint, was the time in which it took to get from point A to point B. And we've seen this across other areas of the train as well. So one of the things we want to really focus on, how do we make the ride, better, smoother? We've done things like add bike cars and bike racks and Wi-Fi to increase the customer experience, but we really need to focus on getting the time down to a more manageable level.
So Mike, time is really on top of people's minds. They're trying to get in and out of the city very quickly. Andy mentioned, kind of the priority of sort of making improvements in the line. Let's start talking about maybe some of the specific improvements either underway or going. And so maybe let's address first the major time project, if you will, to get trains to and from communities, the double track project. So help us understand, people who don't know what that is. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. And, this has been on the drawing board, I think, since Samuel Insull owned the railroad 100 years ago. The vision to extend double tracking out for the rail line from Michigan, from Gary, Indiana to the Chicago rail system that we jump on in Illinois on Metra. We're double tracked, and we can move back and forth seamlessly between one track and another. And we get to Metra, it's quadruple tracked. When we run east of Michigan or Gary towards Michigan City, it's mostly a single track railroad. So think of one-way traffic on a two-way street, or construction projects where you have that flagger on one end holding the stop sign while the traffic comes from the other end. And then when that clears, you turn the sign around and traffic can go the other direction. That's that 25-mile area between Michigan City and Gary is mostly a one-way street. And it limits our ability to run express type service. And it also causes train delays. If anything happens in that 25-mile section, we have no way to avoid it or go around it. So we are double tracking a 25-mile section between Gary and Michigan City. We're putting what are called high-speed crossover or passing lanes, so a train can go from one track to another and effectively run express service to Chicago. We're improving the throughput through Michigan City. We're straightening out some curves. And so between all of those elements, we're going to be able to cut down travel time significantly. And every one of the investments that we make are all west of South Bend. So all that time saving that occurs, it inures to the benefit of our riders out from the South Bend region. So as an example, if you jump on the train in Ogden Dunes, you get some of that time savings, but not all of it. Everybody that's east of where the improvements are made enjoys 100% of the time saving elements that we're investing as part of the double track project.
Great. So Andy, let me come back your way and to get a St. Joe County perspective on that. Obviously, the local community has believed in this and like many other partners has made some significant investment. Talk about what you see in terms of the benefits of St. Joe County and this project that Mike's talking about with double track.
Well, I think that the benefits are huge. I mean, the first, the St. Joe County, along with the other three counties in the region, we each kicked in around $18.5 million for this project. But what a leveraging of funds that we have here locally. We paid under $20 million for a $350 or so million project. And the thing is, we get almost all the benefit, as Mike said. I mean, Michigan City, the LaPorte County probably is the biggest beneficiary, but we're going to save 20 to 30 minutes per trip. So, I mean, it's very easy for me to defend why we're investing this money, because we get the majority of the benefit. And the fact that we had other counties kick in money just shows the importance of the overall South Shore health and well-being.
So Mike, you had the task of pulling together a coalition to make this happen. So talk a little bit about, some of the key strategic partners that have helped advance double track to where that is today.
Yeah, that's a great topic, Jeff, because, in addition to the double track project, we also, in the last 90 days, got a full funding grant agreement for the Westlake project. So I get that question from other commuter CEOs around the country and say, basically, what was your secret sauce, right? And so really the answer is, as Andy pointed out, not only do we have bipartisan support on our board, but our projects have enjoyed incredible bipartisan support at the local, county, state, and federal level. And we leveraged that, and that was clear to the federal transportation and administration personnel who came out. Secretary Elaine Chao, DOT, came out. She saw firsthand and commented about what an incredible grassroots level all the way up to the highest levels of our elected officials in the state of Indiana, all behind this project. We had not only elected officials, we had officials from the chambers of commerce, as you know, from business organizations such as Northwest Indiana Forum. We had we had the realtors, we had the home builders, we had Rankin, our passengers. We had such a coalition of support saying, yeah, let's get this done, and we're behind it. When you build that, and then you have project champions. So on the Westlake project, we had Congressman Pete Visclosky, and he worked with his Republican counterparts to get that funded. On the double track project, I would say our main proponent was Governor Holcomb, and he led the charge from the state of Indiana, and on a bipartisan basis, worked to coalesce that support to help push this project across the line. Not only was it a good project from an economic standpoint, from a ridership standpoint, but from a bipartisan standpoint, it has all the ingredients that you need. And we had our project champions to help push it across the finish line.
Great.
Just to jump in quick, Jeff. I mean, I think that the key to all this was the support of Governor Holcomb, because when we realized there's going to be some funding gaps, the state stepped up right away. We didn't even have to ask. They just stepped up.
Right.
Governor Holcomb reconstituted the board, gave it more leadership with Joe McGinnis as the chairman. So I think it's just been huge, the commitment that the state of Indiana has made to the South Shore.
Yep.
Great. I appreciate it. Mike, I want to stay on the Westlake, or I want to stay on the double track, but I want to shift to Westlake for just a quick second. So if some of our viewers are unfamiliar with the Westlake Connector and what that is, can you give us a quick description of what that project is?
Sure. 30 some years ago, the CSX was abandoning a rail line that ran the old Monon corridor in Hammond and Munster. And South Shore, along with Munster and Hammond, bought that line, that 8 miles, there are actually 6 miles of railroad, to have an opportunity someday to build a commuter rail line. And we've been working towards that end since 1990 and really got momentum starting in 2014. Congressman Visclosky has been the champion on that project. It's a 8 mile line extension from North Hammond down to the Munster-Dyer border. There'll be 4 stations, one at Munster-Dyer border, one at Ridge Road in Munster, at 173rd in Hammond, and then what we call our gateway station in Hammond, where the South Shore line and the Westlake line meet up in North Hammond. So passengers can move back and forth between either line. Somebody can jump on a train in Munster, transfer at Hammond and go to South Bend, or start in South Bend and go to Hammond and go down to Munster, or wherever they want to go. So that's it's a $933 million project, including financing. Double track's a $490 million project, including financing costs. So between those two projects, we're talking about almost $1.5 billion in projects coming in here that are being invested into Northwest Indiana.
Terrific to hear that, and thank you for your good work on that. I'm continuing my conversation with Mike Nolan, the president of the South Shore Railroad, and Andy Castelny from the board there, and also commissioner here in St. Joseph County. Mike, in our last 5 minutes, I just want to touch a little bit more on double track, and so help us understand just timing. So it's a project we're all excited about. It obviously takes a long time to put the financial means in place to make it happen. But help us understand the projected time frame for those improvements happening.
Sure. And first I want to say, we've been talking about what would happen if this project gets funded. We're beyond that. It's now coming soon. We're gonna be hanging out "Pardon our dust" signs here, because we're gonna start turning dirt this summer, and our schedule envisions about a 2-year construction project. We hope to be running revenue service in the fall of 2023, and that's when we enjoy the improvements that the project envisions. Hour 45 service from South Bend. A little over an hour, about 67 minutes from Michigan City, 52 minutes from Chesterton, 42 minutes from Gary Miller Station. 14 more trains a day are coming. So there'll be, not every station's getting 14, but a total of 14 more stations are trains per day. Significant improvements are coming along the line. And coupled with those improvements, we're already seeing huge interest from the private sector in development activity. And that's occurring at stations up and down the line.
Great, pretty exciting to see, and that time will fly. That'll be here before we know it. We're really anxious to see that happen. Commissioner, I'm going to come back your way because, and I want to just talk other improvements. There's been a lot of talk about our end of the line, in the South Bend end of it, and are there ways that we can continue to enhance, speed and help pick that up? Any updates on what's going on in that space?
So we're still trying to find a way to cut that final 10 to 15 minutes. It's kind of like a lazy canoe ride down. Once we get in the city of South Bend, we have to slow down considerably, and it adds 10 to 15 minutes to the trip. So we're trying to find ways that we could move the station to the west side of the airport, and then figure out how we can cut that time further. We like the airport because it's kind of already a transportation hub to begin with. It's easy to get to. Access is very easy, both by rail, by plane, by road. So we're still working on that. We don't have any firm updates yet, but those conversations are still taking place, and we're waiting on a couple of reports to come back, and quite frankly, from the FAA to see if they'll allow us to kind of intermingle into their airspace.
Great. Mike, in our last 3 minutes, come back your way. Just because you talk about other enhancements. So obviously these are pretty big ticket items. Some of these projects, but you mentioned overall the passenger experience and time and why So other things that might be on the horizon in the coming years that our viewers need to know about. Why they might pick the South Shore instead of driving into Chicago.
Sure. We're very close to signing a lease with Metra to acquire 26 additional double-decker cars. So that will bring double-decker cars to our fleet to around 40. We're excited about that. We're investing in high-level boarding at additional stations like Michigan City, at Ogden Dunes and Miller. That's going to enhance the bike service opportunity. So someone who wants to ride a bike and jump on at South Bend and take our train to Michigan City if they want, and jump off and ride in the lake, or go do it at Miller or Ogden Dunes and take the great bike trails if they want to do that. We're also investing in other areas along the line that are going to continue to reduce travel time. And that's our focus, is to continue look at ways to reduce the travel time and improve the trip for our passengers going to and from Chicago. And I will add one commercial here, Jeff. COVID-19 has certainly impacted all of us in many, many ways. Our ridership right now is significantly down because of it, but we've taken the time during this last year to really invest in additional technology and practices. We're safer than ever we've ever been before from a sanitization standpoint. We've got electrostatic sprayers. We do fogging. We've got ultraviolet equipment on the trains. We've hired more cleaners. We're safe. When our riders are ready to come back and emerge back into a society that's post-COVID, we're going to be ready for them.
Commissioner, last 30 seconds, a final word for anybody thinking about using the South Shore?
Well, I think it's a great use of time, because as we know, time is one of the most valuable commodities we have. And if you're driving, you're not working. I mean, it's easier to take advantage of that. Anything we can do to further access the third largest economic market in our country, we as South Bend and St. Joe County simply need to do. I mean, there's so many economic benefits to this. It just makes sense.
Great. He's Mike Nolan from the South Shore Railroad, Commissioner Andy Castelli from the board there, and the commissioner here in St. Joseph County. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here and giving us the update. Congratulations on your great success on the project, and we'll look forward to the dust as the construction gets happening, and in particular enjoying the trip as that work gets done. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's
it for our show today. Thank you for watching on WNIT or listening to our podcast. To watch this episode again or any of our past episodes, you can find Economic Outlook at WNIT.org or find our podcast on most major podcast platforms. Also encourage you to like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. I'm Jeff Ray. I'll see you next week.
This WNIT local production has been made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.